Hello, and welcome to Lore Watch, a roundtable freeform discussion about lore in your favorite media. I'm your host, Joe Perez, one of several lore-focused folks from Blizzard Watch, and I've got my marvelous companion with me today, Matt Rossi. How are you doing today, Matt?
I am here and talky and good. Let's do.
Well, we're going to be doing some talking today, and this is going to be from you, our wonderful listeners, who have provided us with some absolutely wonderful questions to answer today. If you have questions for this or any of our podcasts, be sure to send those in to podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for in the subject line, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. If you want to hit us up on Discord, we have two channels set aside. One is the Q and Podcast question channel. It's open to everybody. Come hang out, ask questions, let us know what you're thinking. Give us themes for the show. Same rules apply, though. Tell us what show it's for, any special pronunciation of your name. And then if you are a Patreon subscriber, we have the Patreon Q and Podcast questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. And as well as we happen to have the Patreon email, where you can send us in those questions or themes or whatever you want. And Dan will get them to us, usually accompanied by some form of cat meme. If you are also listening to this, I would like to also remind you that we are currently doing a little bit of an end of year Patreon drive. Liz mentioned this every week on the main cast, but I figure it's good for those that don't listen to the main cast to have to hear it here. We're a little bit below our operating costs of where we'd like to be. We'd like to keep us about $4,000 a month. That usually helps us pay for the site, keep everything going, and lets us cover all of our bills. We're a little bit below that, and we understand it's the end of the year, and everybo's a little financially strapped. It's completely understandable. But if you are listening to this, please consider donating, even if it's just $1, or $3 a month. Little bits like that do actually help quite a bit, and we're just below our mark. So if 100 people contribute $3 each, I think we're good. Like, we're right at that cusp. So if you are listening, you enjoy our content, and you want to have maybe a little bit more of a say in what we do, go ahead and hit us up on the Patreon, patreon.com/BlizzardWatch, or go to BlizzardWatch.com. We have a link for it on the main page. But without further ado, now that bookkeeping is done, let's go ahead and get into some questions here. And this one comes from Talanari. Just catching up on some episodes after a busy year, and I just got into the What If episodes. I'm still a bit behind, so sorry if it's already been asked, but in Diablo, what if we never shoved the Soulstone into our head at the end of Diablo 1? Now, I put this in here specifically because Matt loves Diablo, and I really just wanted to kind of shake him up and set him loose and see what the wind-up man would do. So, do you have thoughts or opinions on this, Matt?
Well, actually, funny enough, I've been thinking about it, not related to this question. I just think about this kind of thing. And let me put it this way. I think Vessel of Hatred gives us a pretty good idea of what would happen. In that he'd have been walking with a Soulstone that was no longer fully containing the primeval inside it. Rather than having it inside his head, turning him into what he was, it would have been acting much as the one that Nerel was carrying was. So forcing him into delusions, causing explosions of, in his case, terror instead of rage, and corrupting the area around him, much as Nerel's did to her. You'll notice that Nerel didn't go through a lot of physical corruption, whereas obviously by the time he got to where he was going, the physical shell of Aidan was all but gone. Like, Diablo had fully converted it. And that's the thing, is that in the events of the first Diablo kind of give us a sense that there's lots of reasons why we have to think carefully about this. First up, the Soulstone that Nerel was carrying had a weakened form of Baal in it, but that not of Baal, Mephisto. I'm sorry. Wow.
Well,
sorry.
Real quick question. I wanted to ask you real quick about that. Wasn't also the Soulstone that Nerel was using not originally designed for Mephisto, and also may have been a contributor? Okay, perfect. We're on the same page. Wonderful.
Basically, that Soulstone had a lot of qualifiers. The first qualifier was that it was originally the Soulstone that Donan made to contain the Duke of Cinders, Ashtaroth, and not a primeval. It wasn't made to hold a primeval. The only reason it worked at all was because they reattuned it, but also because Baal, I keep saying Baal, Mephisto was weakened. The Mephisto we face had just gotten back into the hells, in demonic terms, relatively recently. He's been regenerating and regrowing his power, but he wasn't at his peak. the Soulstone Diablo was in was made to hold Diablo, but it had been weakening over time because the Soulstones aren't permanent solutions. They do erode and corrupt over time, and he was at full power in that thing. He wasn't weakened at all. He'd been a servant of Mephisto's, had come to Tristan specifically to find him, and then began putting him into people. He was going to put him into the king, but Leoric died and became the Skeleton King because he went insane. So he had to put him in the king's son instead. When he did that, Leoric wasn't dead yet. He wasn't the Skeleton King yet, but he was going crazy. He was too crazy to be useful as a host. He had essentially broken, but he still had a strong enough will that Lazarus was like, all right, if he can be this much of a maniac but still exist, this might not work. So I'm going to have to go with the kid. The kid's not going to have the willpower to stop a demon. So he put the Soulstone, essentially he put the Soulstone into the younger brother. I always want to say his name was Albrecht, whatever his name was, put the Soulstone into him, turned him into Diablo, but then he wasn't a full power Diablo because it was a kid. So when Aidan came, he and his two buddies killed what they thought was Diablo. It turned back into Aidan's brother. Aidan snapped, seeing all this, and I'm pretty sure the Soulstone started whispering in his head, "Stick me in your head." And Aidan was like, "Yeah, that'll work." If Aidan hadn't done that, he would have basically had some advantages that Nerel didn't have, like being a fully grown adult with two friends with him who were both like, hey, maybe we shouldn't do that. But he would have had the disadvantage of going up against a fully powered primeval, one of the three primes, at full power. Whereas Nerel had the disadvantage of that Soulstone not originally having been made for Diablo, that Soulstone having been broken. They had to rebuild that thing. Remember, they had to use elemental, alchemical quicksilver and so forth.
Oh yeah.
To essentially
reassembled the pieces, like a jigsaw puzzle almost.
So it wasn't even in perfect shape to hold him. It wasn't designed for him. It wasn't directly made by an angel. Only two beings have been shown to be able to make perfect Soulstones, or as close to perfect as we're going to get. The first one being Tyrael. Tyrael helped make the original three, and even they started failing after a while. The other one is Zoltan Kulle. Zoltan Kulle's Black Soulstone could hold angels or demons, and we have no idea how long they could do it, but they could do it long enough that the guys who died in Diablo II were still in it in Diablo III. Both, even Baal was in it. Baal dies at the end when the Soulstone chamber gets blown to hell. Baal dies there. He ended up in the Black Soulstone.
Yeah, and the interesting
thing,
thing,
stayed in it.
Well, not only did he stay in it, I think it's interesting to point out, we didn't see any obvious signs of bleed out either, right? It's one of those weird things where the Black Soulstone may have actually been a perfect artifact created by Zoltan Kulle, who, Zoltan Kulle is one of my favorite characters in Diablo history because dude was just an absolutely egomaniacal maniac, but also his ego was partially earned. And then when it came to the creation of the Black Soulstone, I think that sort of proves it. Dude was a genius when it came to manipulating alchemical and magical formula.
Not just that, Kulle was a recognizable Nephilim.
Yeah, 100%.
He was tapping into it. In time, Kulle could have risen to the power of, say, Lunarian, aka Rathma.
I think he might have actually been able to surpass him just because of his knowledge of how power works.
Yeah, and because he'd studied the Soulstones, because he understood that they could work on both angels and demons if properly configured. The fact that he made the Black Soulstone apparently is a near perfect container. It is the Soulstone that all other Soulstones wish they were.
With the only caveat being that their weakness is that somebody from the outside could, in theory, crack or misshape them, which is what we saw during Diablo 3, right?
Yes, exactly. The other problem being not only could they do that, they could draw upon the power of the primes inside, all seven of them, all the seven evils that are inside the Soulstone. If you have them all there, you can draw upon the power of all of them. And that's kind of terrifying. Also, when you cut a piece of the Black Soulstone off, it essentially becomes a resonator that tells you where the Black Soulstone currently is. And that's interesting because that implies that the Black Soulstone, it is my opinion that the Soulstones are and always have been related to the Worldstone. Like, I believe they were made from pieces of the Worldstone. I don't know if it says so in the lore or not, but that's what I believe. But anyway, getting back to it. So you've got Aidan, and one assumes Bloodraven, and I can't remember the wizard's name, I'm sorry. But those two coming along, trudging along with him as he tries to get to the tomb where Talrasha is. He's not going to be picking up Marius, which is important, because Marius is important to what happens in the setting. So he's trudging along. Now, the fury of the Lord of Terror inside the Soulstone is going to be warping the land around him. It's going to be attacking him mentally. Keep in mind that there's a witch in Tristram who works for Diablo, and who in our timeline...
Audra, right?
What?
Or what? Why can't I remember her name now?
Adria.
Why did I say Audra? Yeah, close enough.
Because it's close enough. When he comes out of that cathedral carrying that soulstone, is she going to give him good advice? I don't think so. But he's got two people with him, so she can't be as blatant. She can't just go, "Okay, Diablo, let's fornicate and make a baby." She's still going to try to do it because that's part of the plan. And as long as Aidan's holding the soulstone, things could still work out. Like, he could still stick it in his head. One of the other two could stick it in their heads. She might suggest that if she thinks it would work. But for now, let's assume that they're not quite so far gone that they're willing to stick that thing in their heads. They then make their way out of Tristram and towards Luc-Golain. They're trying to get to the tomb of Talrasha. Here's where stuff that we know happened in Diablo II, we have to think about whether or not it would have happened. There's no Bloodraven's with him and hasn't been corrupted yet because he didn't stick the thing in his head. So she's not going to take over the monastery of the Seeing Eye. That's not going to happen. So she's not going to attack the rogues. They're going to just get through. There's not going to be any difficulty. The heroes from Diablo II originally get involved because there's a blockage at the monastery of the Seeing Eye and you can't get through. That's not happening this time. So those people may not even get involved. Oh, bloody heck, I cannot remember his name, and he's the stay a while and listen guy. I hate when my brain does this. I know who he is. We all know who he is.
Deckard Cain.
Thank you. Brain's not wanting to say names today. Deckard Cain might, in fact, have just been waiting for him in Tristram. Like, he was there in Diablo, the original Diablo. Deckard Cain's in Tristram. He didn't go with Aidan the first time because Aidan had the demon thing in his head and just left and didn't go by, essentially. So Cain might have been with them, which might have made Adria even more circumspect. So imagine this weird party of Deckard Cain, the three amigos, Aidan, Bloodraven, and Mystery Wizard, whose name I can never remember, and maybe Adria, because she's like, "Oh, I will come and help you." That's what she did with us. So in Diablo 3, so maybe she would have done it this time.
Mm-hmm.
The five of them are going. Whole time Adria's trying to figure out, how do I get some moron to put this thing in their head? They get to Luc-Golain. They have the confrontation. Talrasha's still got Baal inside of him. Because remember, that all happened centuries ago. Talrasha had to stick the broken soulstone up to himself and let Baal take over his body and then just have himself be trapped there so Baal couldn't go do anything. So you got that happening. Without the Dark Wanderer directly there, without Aidan possessed by Diablo there, and without Marius there, what happens? That's when I don't know. Baal, remember at this point, Baal didn't have a soulstone. Like, his soulstone was useless. It was fragments on his body. Now, in the game, Tyrael shows up. In Diablo 2, Tyrael shows up at this point, but he's overmatched because he has to fight against both Baal and Diablo. And everybody gets away and bad things happen. Marius is there to make it worse. I believe Marius even straight up frees him.
Yeah.
Without Marius there, but with Adria there, but with everybody else there not wanting this to happen, your guess is as good as mine as to what happens here. But let's go with two possibilities, one of which I will call the Sanctuary option, and one of them called Sanctuary Plus. The Sanctuary option is everything goes pear-shaped, Baal gets out, and Adria gets her hands on Diablo's Soul Stone, and since she has no other option, jams it in her own head, thus allowing Diablo to walk in her body for a while. The two of them escape. Tyrael is like, "How could you have possibly trusted Adria?" The Tyrael from Diablo 3 goes, "Look, it was a mistake, okay?" But no one cares. So now you have the two demon lords traveling to meet up with Mephisto at the Zakharov. That's one possibility. The other possibility is they managed to repair the Soul Stone for Baal and jam him back in it. And that means they've now got two Soul Stones that they're trying to get demon lords in them, that they're trying to get to the Pandemonium Forge, which they can only do by getting to Mephisto because he's the one who's got a portal to Pandemonium handy. Can they make it? It then becomes basically, can we get these two Soul Stones where we need them to go before they get free, and now we have two demon lords running around? I think at this point, Adria would have had to be unmasked and either killed or escaped in order for that to happen. Otherwise, she's going to do something. She's going to jam it in her own head, or she's going to jam it in somebody else's head. Like, as soon as she gets her hands on it, she's looking for a head. So let's assume for a moment those are your two basic variations here. Which one's more likely? I mean, part of me is like using meta knowledge here. It's Diablo. It's Sanctuary. We're always going to get the worst possible thing, right? But we don't always get the worst possible. I mean, the worst possible thing in Diablo 3 would have been that Malthael's plan succeeds, right? But It didn't. It's possible that at this point, since he doesn't have to worry about, he didn't get ambushed, he didn't have to fight both Baal and Diablo at once, like he just had to deal with Adria, and Adria is not in his league power-wise, it's possible Tyrael could have just taken them straight to Pandemonium Fortress. He might have said, you know what, no, we'll go to Pandemonium directly from here. And if that's the case, they could destroy both Baal and Diablo immediately. I mean, not destroy them forever. They go back to their planes. But we're talking a couple hundred years of straight-up frustration if they can get them there right then, which they might have been able to do. That just leaves us with what is basically the ending of Vessel of Hatred, except in Diablo 2, because you just have Mephisto in the body of the Quahagen running the Zakharum faith, and now you have to figure out, what do we do about this? The only reason that it worked previously was because of the disruption that the Dark Wanderer was causing as he made his way to go get Baal, and then the literal chaos that his presence caused as he went through into the various parts of I want to say, man, I'm not saying the right city. It's the religious one, the holy one. It's in Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred, the one we go to, the Temple City. I cannot remember the name of this city.
I can't either, because now you're saying that you can't remember it, so now my brain's like blanked.
It's not Chaldeum, obviously. That's Diablo 3. It's Travancore.
Travancore.
Yeah, you go to Travancore, and this is Mephisto's place of power. And you don't
it's also
have
the headquarters of the Church of the Zakharum in Kurast.
Yeah, Kurast and Travancore. You go there, and those two places are inviolate, because Mephisto has no reason to corrupt them. He's corrupting them subtly, but he's not like letting chaos destroy everything. That's not his deal. In order for the players to deal with Mephisto, they're going to have to get through the entire Zakharum faith. And I'm not saying they couldn't do it. I mean, but we have at this point, who would you be playing? You'd basically be playing one of the three between Aidan, Bloodraven, and Mystery Wizard, or you'd be playing, you may be playing Deckard Cain at this point.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Because he would have tagged along. None of the player characters would be there. None of the barbarian, the necromancer, because they only stopped originally because they were held up at the monastery of the Sightless Eye. But if that's not happening, then the end of what we call Diablo 2, that era, would be vastly different, and we're not really sure what would have happened at the end of it. But I can tell you one thing that wouldn't have happened: the Worldstone doesn't get blown up.
Yeah, I keep thinking about that too, where like it doesn't get blown up, but I also think I think it starts a cascading chain of events that is how we get to where we are right now.
Let me put it this way.
Go ahead.
I don't want to interrupt you. I want to let you speculate too, since this whole thing, but it depends on if we consider ourselves in Sanctuary or Sanctuary 2 mode, those two timelines I mentioned. If we're in the worst possible timeline, where somebody got Diablo'd and Baal is now loose, and there's there's nobody, there's no big heroes to stop them, because now all you got left are like Bloodraven and Mystery Wizard and maybe Deckard Cain. And Deckard's, bless his heart, but Deckard's really old. He's not as really old as he's going to be in like 30 or so years, but he's really old, and it's kind of a lot to ask him to do, But those three, if it's those three up against these two, and Diablo gets to go on to the Church of Zakarum to meet up with Mephisto, and Baal gets to run around, then you do get the Worldstone destroyed. Almost certainly. Because the only one that could have stopped it never joined up on this ridiculous fight in the first place. Doesn't even know what's happening, is doing whatever they were doing down in the south. And so the Worldstone gets destroyed, and they're not even there for it. So that's a possibility. So we got to keep that in mind. It depends on if they can get rid of the other two before moving on Mephisto or not. Go ahead now.
What I was going to basically say is, relatively the similar stuff, but like, I think that going back to the original root of the question, with Aidan shoving the Soul Stone into his head, what winds up happening is that is the pivotal moment, right? That is the moment that splits these two timelines, essentially, where you either get Sanctuary 1, which we've had, and this is what we've gone through in the current timeline, or you get Sanctuary 2, what you're talking about. The interesting thing is, I think it changes a lot of what happened cascading afterwards. Think of some of the larger events that occurred. If he never shoved the Soul Stone into his head, and Diablo was never really essentially given another physical form, Diablo 2's events become a lot different. You don't have nearly the amount of loss that you have, and instead it becomes almost like what Diablo 4 was, where it becomes a chase for the stone. Because you have...
It's very much like Vessel of Hatred. It's the thing you really have to look at is Vessel of Hatred is a really good model for what you would have been dealing with. Because Aidan and his buddies would have been transporting that stone, and it would have been trying to destroy and corrupt them, but none of them would have it in their heads.
Yeah, but it would also be to varying degrees, too. Like we've already established earlier, it was a stone purpose-built. So not a repurposed stone, not a stone for a minor demon. That, to this point, had been relatively well contained until it was essentially shoved into somebody else's head in Diablo 4, because that seems to be a thing that occurs, and that's what happens.
Don't put this thing in a head.
Yeah.
Just in case someone ever finds one, you find a glowing rock that's whispering, "I am the Lord of Terror." Don't put that in your or anybody else's head.
Yeah. But you essentially have something it's trying to, the primeval is trying to exert its will around it, but we don't know the level to which it could. And it might be...
We do have some signs.
Some, but not a lot.
Yeah, this is what we can work on to build a basic idea, but it is only a basic idea. We know that Mephisto could corrupt people.
Yes,
we know that
from his purpose-built stone, he could influence people.
And keep in mind that was a couple hundred years later, but still, he started being able to do it almost right away. It feels like the original Soul Stones lacked the ability to prevent the demon from reaching out with its thoughts, but it didn't. They couldn't do things.
Well, and here's the interesting thing. You mentioned this earlier, and I think it has a matter of resonance. And the reason I say that is because and we've talked about this during our Diablo shows, what is the one thing that the primevals and the archons of the high heavens have in common? They are all essentially ideals or emotions that mortals have. Terror, fear, hatred, gluttony, all these things, all these negative things are things that we as living things sort of experience. So I don't think the Soul Stones took that into account. And I think that maybe is the difference between Zoltan Kuhl's Soul Stone and the original Soul Stones. Because the original Soul Stones are made out of what? What are they pieces of?
Pretty sure they're pieces of the Worldstone, but again, I don't know. Not 100%.
Yeah, they are 100% pieces of the Worldstone that have been crafted into this. The Worldstone made Sanctuary. Everything that is alive on Sanctuary, everything that exists there, essentially owes itself to the Soul Stone, even if it's derivative of the Nephilims because of everything else that happened around it. If you are a living being holding on to a stone of terror, it's going to resonate with your natural ability to feel fear. And that is something that I don't think they originally accounted for. But I think, again, like I said, you essentially have Diablo 2 becomes what essentially Diablo 4 Vessel of Hatred was. It's a chase. It's a chase of everybody trying to get the stone.
And once you have it, once you've got the 2 stones, and you're trying to figure out what to do with them, because can you take the swiftest route to deal with it?
And what is that route? Because you are still going to have that resonance. Now,
do you have to walk with like a remade soul stone of destruction that has been destroyed and therefore is not as powerful as it should be, and the slowly deteriorating stone of terror, both of which contain fully powered primevals? Do you have to now try to get to Karast, go down into the basement, fight the Quahagen with Mephisto in him, get that soul stone, and somehow get through into Pandemonium carrying all 3? Can this be done in time?
Yeah, and then you start having, I think, a different cascading effects as well from beyond that, right? So Diablo 2 becomes a much different game, and when it ends and you start moving into Diablo 3, that becomes much different too. At this point, it's very likely that Adria already has the stone and has already been working to resurrect Diablo, or to bring Diablo back to a physical form. But Leah's not born at this point. Leah doesn't get born because she wasn't fathered by Diablo in a human body. And so what does she do? She probably finds another vessel, probably a younger vessel, because children can be a lot more easily manipulated or taken over, at least from what we've seen with like the Quahagen and everything else. The younger they are, the more subtler you can be, the less power you have to exert.
We see that with Aidan's younger brother.
Yeah.
He is controlled very easily.
And you also then get to a situation where, because the world hasn't been essentially through a post-apocalyptic situation, you get to the end of Diablo 3, and I don't think you have a Malthael situation anymore, right?
Like, here's the thing, too. Well, here's the thing. You don't have any Nephilim either. I mean, there's very few of them, because the original Nephilim still exist, and ones like Zolt and Kul are occasionally born, but most of them, the ones we see in Diablo 3, it doesn't happen because the Worldstone is still there, keeping them from doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a world where Zolt, even if we still see an upsurge, a resurgence of the demon lords in Diablo 3, and there's a lot of talk about how that could get there, there's no Nephilim to fight them. There's no Nephilim to stand up and basically say, F you to the demons. It also means that if Malthael decides he's going to kill all of the humans, there's no one to stop him. And that's interesting because he could still find the Black Soulstone. I mean, Adria knew where it was, and he found it. When they took it from her, when they took it at the end of the main game, he found it. He knew where it was. He went right down to Earth with the Sanctuary and took it from Tyrael and the Horadrim. He just took it. They couldn't stop him. So that's like, does that still happen? I don't know. Is it possible that it wouldn't work because of the Worldstone still existing? Maybe. But the fact that the Worldstone still exists means he might not have gone crazy in the first place.
That's what I'm getting at, is I think that's most likely what would happen, because the Nephilim not essentially coming back up to power doesn't lead to that same fear that leads down that road for him. And so it's also more likely that the angels are more involved in a positive than a negative way, because at this point, the war just continues to happen. They want to get those soul stones back. They want to make sure that they prevent the primevals from coming back. And they're not worried about us essentially murdering them at this point. So they don't really care about us in terms of a threat, but they're more willing to help us at that point because we're not a threat to them. And I think that Malthael doesn't destroy 9/10 of humanity, or however much the percentage was. Malthael doesn't put this world into a full post-apocalyptic, terrorizing spree. And so by the time you get to Diablo 4, humanity is in a much better place to try to defend against the encroaching darkness.
Maybe. Or on the other
potentially,
hand, if things don't go well, like if we end the Diablo 2 era, if we end that at a place where the Worldstone still exists, and 2 of the Soul Stones are gone, they took them to the forge that they tried taking them to in Diablo 2 as we know it, and smashed them. That means there's 2 primevals in the Black Soulstone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There'd be Diablo and Baal would be in there. Mephisto might still be running the Zaka room because, yeah, the heroes all know that's where he is, but they can't do anything about it. Maybe they just can't get to him. It's like, how do we get past all the armies of the faithful? How do we get past the entire full Zakarum church that hasn't had like a demon lord, wandering through, messing everything up? Like, the demon lord that's in charge of the Zakarum, Mephisto, is very good at running the Zakarum because he's been doing it for 200 years. He's not a schmuck. He knows what he's doing. So I think that you start to like look at this and go, okay, we could be looking at a very different Diablo 3, and we don't know what the differences might be. It's very hard. Like, if the Black Soul Stone has 2 of the demon lords in it, but Mephisto's still running around, then I tell you right now, Belial and Asmodon are not going to try to come in on Sanctuary when they know Mephisto's there. They are absolutely not going to step to Mephisto. Asmodon won't step to him because Asmodon knows that one-on-one he can't beat him. Belial won't step to him because he knows how Mephisto's mind works, because Belial was effectively Mephisto's understudy for a while. He knows, if he's already got plans for what'll happen if I show up and if I don't show up, and if Asmodon shows up, and if Asmodon shows up without me, and if Asmodon shows up with me, and with Duriel, and with Andariel. He knows Mephisto's the thinker of the group, so he's not going to risk that. So a lot of possibilities. Like, imagine Malthael shows up as backup, because at this point he's Archangel of Wisdom and he isn't gone mad because the Worldstone hasn't been destroyed. Like, the whole reason we got Reaper of Souls is that Malthael went looking for the Worldstone and there wasn't one to find.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was gone. There was just this void, and that drove him nuts. But it's not destroyed. If it doesn't get wiped out this time, Tyrael doesn't blow it up. Tyrael's still there. He doesn't spend 50 years putting himself back together. Malthael goes looking for it, finds it. He goes to the Worldstone chamber, and Tyrael's waiting for him. And he's like, you didn't pick sides last time. You have to pick sides now. I need you on my side. Like, Mephisto is going to corrupt this entire planet, and he will have all of these souls to throw at us if we don't stop him. And that'd be what the beginning of Diablo 3 could very well be: Malthael and Tyrael versus Mephisto, and all the ways that could go wrong. And then we really just don't know.
And then I think the interesting thing too about that too, and this is where I think is for me is one of the more fascinating ones, is that by the time you get to the 4th game, again, humanity has not been decimated. And because of that, there's a lot more just pure bodies willing to fight.
There's a lot of possibility.
Look
possibility, absolutely.
Look how much damage the Church of Light did with what they had, and this is after humanity had been decimated. Now imagine,
this is after 50 years of trying to rebuild from 1 in 10.
Now imagine this is Tyrael who comes down instead of Inarius and is raising an army of people to fight by his side. Tyrael, still an angel, full-fledged angel, who comes down and says, we need to work together to, to fight off the encroaching evils and save the souls of humanity. You need to be involved in this fight. It's not just us. You need to fight as well. How many people would flock to that banner, and how different of a force would that be? Could they actually take the fight to the burning hells at that point if they needed to break into it and not get pushed back or not be completely destroyed? Because again, go for it. I think you were going. You think yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, if they're doing that, if we have to take Mephisto out. Mm-hmm. We need somebody who knows what he's planning.
Mm-hmm.
Who do we know who's been privy to Mephisto's planning over the past 1,000 years or so? Didn't we leave Inarius in hell?
Mm-hmm.
In Mephisto's realm?
And now you go and you mount a rescue mission, and Inarius, instead of being completely driven insane by the heavens completely cutting him off, the heavens come and save him.
Yeah, he might still be completely insane, but he's completely insane, yet willing to do what you want him to do because it's
now he's
in
a
his
fanatic.
best interests. Yeah, absolutely. This, however, does lead to an even weirder idea, in that while that's happening, somebody decides to call Lilith.
Yeah.
Because in Sanctuary, as we know it from Diablo 4, eventually one of the Haradrim decides, I'm going to call Lilith. But that was in a world where the Nephilim had risen and the Worldstone was gone and all this. If we bring Inarius back to a world where the Soulstone or the Worldstone still exists and Inarius, who knows the most about using it, has been rescued from hell, Daddy and daughter might make up. Like, he might call her out of the void himself and like, look, you hate me and I hate you because, for one thing, we're both hate. But think about it this way. We both hate them more, right? And you want this world to exist. I want to win the war. You want to win the war. I didn't listen to your plans before, but I really think that they're I'm warming up on them. They're growing on me. Let's talk. And both of them would obviously be plotting to destroy the other. But it's not like they don't hate those guys.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Lilith absolutely hates Inarius. He hates her. However, in this one, he didn't kill their son.
And in fact, their son likely come out of retirement at this point.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe they all would.
Yeah.
Maybe Asu and Fiakla Giar and, Bulkathos all show up. And keep in mind this, the Worldstone would still be something both sides would want to put in play.
Mm-hmm.
Except since it still exists, and keep in mind, it only exists because a Nephilim made it continue existing.
Mm-hmm.
It was falling apart. If they'd been allowed to do what it was going to do, it would have stopped working. It would have blown itself apart.
Yeah, and I think that's actually really fascinating too, because like, does it destabilize at this point? Does it collapse in on itself?
Well, all these things are happening around it. The world is not built. Sanctuary is not built to have full-fledged, evil versus good, angel versus demon battles on it. That wasn't what it was created for. And we also know that Sanctuary has, like, when we see the spirit realm, when we go to Nahaku, that whole area has a completely different existence that is not of heaven or hell.
Mm-hmm.
Sanctuary has effectively created a framework around itself. Like, in a very real way, I keep thinking about the idea that Sanctuary, it's like, if you consider the fabric of the universe before the creation of Sanctuary, you've got the heavens and the hells, and they basically they warp existence around them so that you get pandemonium at the point where their influences are both exactly the same. At the point where the heavens and their influence and the hell's influence both meet at the scar that was created when Anu and Tathamet destroyed each other, is the exact peak of pandemonium. That's where the Pandemonium Fortress is. That's where the Worldstone was. That it's at that one exact spot where both those forces collided, where Anu and Tathamet killed each other. That's where the Worldstone was. That's where the Worldstone still technically was right up till its destruction. Because they basically made Sanctuary as its own reality around the Worldstone. They didn't take it out of the fortress. That's the thing. That's how Malthael finds it and finds that it's not there. He goes to where it's supposed to be, and there's nothing. There's just a trail of dead things, dead spirits going, hey, what's going on? Getting dragged out of it. And that's how you know the Worldstone's not there. Which does beg the question, does that mean that souls were going to the Worldstone?
Yeah, and I think I
died?
I think I brought this up before, right? Like, what happened to a soul when it passed? And it going to the Worldstone seemed like the most likely thing, which is, how life continues, how everything goes through. Because, again, like, we have the spirit realm, but we know that that's not the normal place that humanoid spirits go. It's something that essentially was created later and serves a completely different purpose. Go ahead.
Possibly it was created by Sanctuary itself.
Yeah, or possibly
the fact
by
of Sanctuary existing caused that to exist. And that's the thing I'm trying to say, is that the subtlety of the creation of Sanctuary might be far, far greater than we understand, because it was created by an angel and a demon working together, but it was created by the Worldstone. Mm-hmm. And the Worldstone before, when it would create things, those things would collapse the second someone stopped concentrating on them. But at this point, Sanctuary not only seems to exist without, it doesn't need either Inarius or Lilith concentrating on it. It doesn't need either of them having any control over the Worldstone. It doesn't even need the Worldstone, because we know in our timeline, Sanctuary still exists and the Worldstone's gone. There's no Worldstone, but the world exists. And the thoughts and feelings and dreams of people create things like the spirit realm. At this point, this thing's self-sustaining. It makes itself. And I think that's why those souls were trying to go to the Worldstone, because part of the process of making itself was to essentially set up streams that go back to somewhere else, that then become part of the new creation. And that means to me, one of the things we never really thought about is exactly why Baal wanted to corrupt the Worldstone. Because Baal's not about corruption, Baal's about destruction. So maybe he wanted the Worldstone destroyed because he is destruction. Why didn't he just destroy it? Why did he make Tyrael do it?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Like, there's a possibility that Baal wanted to use Sanctuary to literally destroy everything. Because think about what happens if Sanctuary is a stable creation built around and containing the power of the Worldstone, and you destroy the Worldstone, you take the pin out. Have you just armed the grenade? And is it going to explode out into the realities around it, or is it going to implode them into it? Is it going to pull the heavens and the hells into itself, like when you take a soul stone and jam it into somebody's head, and now suddenly the demon's inside the body and can corrupt the body? Can they get the angels and the demons to literally be part of Sanctuary? Can you eat the heavens and the hells? Like, this is something I keep thinking about. I know we're kind of getting really wild here. We're getting way past the question you asked me.
Yeah, you know what? Let's keep going, because I mean, why not? We got about 15 minutes left, and I think we can get some of this stuff out there.
Because the spirit realm, to me, when I played through Vessel of Hatred, the first thing the spirit world said to me is that there are alternatives.
Yeah, like there are multiple different options or things that exist that aren't this.
Yeah, you don't have to be an angel. You don't have to be a demon. There are things that are spirits. There are things that are not, that are like that. The line that I remember you talking about it to me first, and I've always thought about it since. The bit where someone says to the witch doctor lady, the witch lady, says, these swamps are part of Sanctuary, and she goes, "Oh, are they?" And I haven't stopped thinking about that since you made it up. Made the point. You didn't make it up, but you made the point that they'd said that about the marsh. And I'm like, what does she mean? Like, does she mean that calling it a part of Sanctuary isn't accurate because it's not a part of Sanctuary? Or does she mean that saying it's a part of Sanctuary doesn't understand its importance? Like, what if this area, these regions, aren't part of Sanctuary? Their Sanctuary is something growing out of them. And we talked about that with all the underground stuff, how there's like tendrils everywhere and always it seems organic and alive. Well, Sanctuary could be a living thing, like as its entire existence. There could be a will to it to keep existing in a way that none of the other creations ever had.
I think there's a level of that, right? And the reason I think so is because, and you brought this up right now, with the the Worldstone completely destroyed. It does not exist anymore. The Sanctuary persists. It is self-maintaining.
If anything, Sanctuary seems to be getting stronger.
If anything, Sanctuary seems to be getting stronger. But I think there's an element of Sanctuary as a living thing. But here's the other interesting thing that I've been thinking about too, and this goes with the destruction of the Worldstone. The Worldstone is destroyed. What happened to all of those pieces?
Yeah, some of them made up a big part of the Diablo Immortal story. But that's a whole thing you guys got to go see. We'd be here all day.
Yeah. But the thing that I keep thinking about is they're not uniform sizes. They can't be.
No.
Which means that larger and smaller chunks went everywhere. So is it possible that pieces of the Worldstone flew off and generated new places, latched on to somebody's belief and made it real? Because at the end of the day, all mortals are descended from Nephilim, correct?
All mortals, yeah. Basically, all humans are Nephilim that have just been stunted by the Worldstone originally.
And we know for a fact that human belief is able to shape the immaterial. That's why the spirit realm exists.
Well, we also know that belief can actually shape the Worldstone remains, because we see that happening in Diablo Immortal.
Bingo.
Like the I forget her name, but she's in Diablo 2 as a vampire, the Countess of Blood or the Blood Countess or whatever. She gets a chunk of the corrupted Worldstone and uses that to recreate herself.
Mm-hmm.
She makes herself new and healthy and young, which she wasn't in Diablo 2. And this kind of leads us to two questions that are related. The question you're asking and another related question is, what if we gathered all the fragments of the Worldstone, we're not going to have the Worldstone again. We're not going to have something as big or as powerful as the Worldstone. Where did all that power go?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer seems to be into humans, because humans were the creations of the angels and the demons that created the Worldstone. The Nephilim, they essentially both Anu and Tathamet's legacy in them, which is what the Worldstone is. The Worldstone was a piece of the god before he split himself, and humans are like that getting re-put back together. So the humans are like the Worldstone after Anu has gone through the process of splitting himself into two things, which then split themselves into smaller things, which then split themselves yet again to create humans in the first place. So you feel like there's almost like a symbiotic relationship between Sanctuary, the Worldstone, and the mortals that live there, which would explain why the souls were going back to the Worldstone, because they would then go to the Worldstone, give it their experiences. This is my life. This is everything I experienced when I was alive. Okay, now put that back out into the world. And I think the spirit world is how it did it. Because you see in the spirit realm, all these spirits almost exist as like training tools. Like you look at how the one that really gets me is the one that gets killed while you're trying to get to the tomb, and it really messes up your friend.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember his name, like Batun or something, but that one taught him everything about being a spirit, his spirit-born stuff. It educated him. And all the spirit-born get their education from spirits. Why are the spirits so interested in teaching us things? Why is the natural world telling druids how to druid?
Mm-hmm.
Why are barbarians capable of talking to their own ancestors and gaining power from it? Like, they get stronger because grandpa's ghost showed up and told them how to hit things better. They can even call. Like I used to joke when I was playing my barbarian that I was the call of the ancients spell. I was like, that's me calling my grandfather, my other grandfather, and one of my grandmas. And I love the idea that their ancestors are so tightly bound to them that they can reach out and talk to them. But that's kind of backed up by Diablo 3, isn't it?
It is.
Because you see your various, like, even if you're the demon hunter, you see your dead sister.
Templar.
If you're the
or the
Templar,
Crusader, excuse me, Crusader.
Crusader, yeah. The Crusader sees, the one that taught them. There's just a lot of this. I really do feel like Sanctuary at this point is an organism, or even a meta-organism. It's not going to go away. Like, if anything, it's going to spread. It's going to grow. And your idea of the Worldstones, like, going out and making other realities, what if that's, like, how it reproduces?
Yeah.
Like maybe it wasn't Baal who wanted the Worldstone destroyed. Maybe it was, Sanctuary. Okay, it's time. Pop this thing so I can spread throughout all this void. Because think about it. All these universes that used to exist don't exist anymore, right?
Yep.
All the ones people tried to use the Worldstone to make, they lost as soon as they stopped concentrating on it. Maybe this is how it's going to seed itself. It's going to make more realities, more places to exist. We're going from this strict binary of good and evil to one of maybe infinite possibility, all coming from Sanctuary.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those weird things where that one decision, going back to the root of the question, of to shove that soul stone into a body, into their body, into Aidan's body, was like a defining moment. We talk about, like, some stories have conversations about like fixed points in time, or things that, if these things were to change, would drastically alter the trajectory of reality. And this is one of them. This is one of those things where if that never happened, there's no telling how much different, or how much things would be different. But it would be it's very clear that it would be wildly different, at least to me. And I really like that.
If you think about too, without, in a weird sort of way, the destruction of 9/10 of humanity by Malthael does put all those souls out there at a time when the primevals are coming. The world suddenly has a whole lot of energy banked.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's something to consider when you're thinking about what would have happened. It's very hard to imagine Diablo without Diablo 2 as we have had it. It's Diablo 1, certainly, if Diablo 1 doesn't happen, then we just don't have a game series. You know what I mean? But if Diablo 2 doesn't happen, if the things we see in Diablo 2 don't happen, then we have no idea, like, what would the game world even be?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how something built so long ago is so pivotal to how everything is built, how everything goes on. And we've talked about this before about other franchises where, and again, Diablo is a really good example of this, as are some of, well, I don't say all, but most of the Blizzard IPs. Diablo is something that has been paying dividends when they didn't know that it was going to be as like it was, right? The popularity of Diablo 2 was not expected. They knew that it would be popular, or at least popular enough. They justified it or they wanted to justify it and in making the spending the development time, founding a whole new campus for it, because again, don't forget, Diablo 2 is Blizzard North, which was a whole new campus dedicated specifically to it. But in the game world, Diablo 2 became so pivotal for every piece of lore to come after it, that all of the decisions, all of the things, all the canon events that happen at the beginning during the story all the way through to the end define Diablo as a universe, as an IP. And not just story related here. I think it's interesting because there's a parallel to it where in real life, the video game creation of Diablo 2 did that for so many other franchises. Without Diablo 2, there would be no Torchlight. There would be no, Grim
Path
Dark.
of Exile.
There would be no Path of Exile.
No, and Path of Exile by itself is so big that now there's a Path of Exile 2 coming out.
Yes, which we're going to talk about in the main cast at some point.
Well, it's like, I mean, just to go back to your idea for a moment about the Worldstone being shattered and creating other worlds. In a very real way, at the end of Diablo 2, when they destroy the Worldstone, a whole bunch of video games come out of that.
Yeah.
What was the one in London?
Hellgate London, which was created, London? Which was, and I was going to talk about that one a little bit. Well, I shouldn't say a little bit, but I was going to mention it because after Diablo 2 was done and after Blizzard North moved away, when they were no longer Blizzard North, that office closed down, the people from Blizzard North went and made Hellgate London.
Yeah, and it's basically
which
like
was ahead of its
successor.
Which was way ahead of its time too, which we can talk about in the main cast sometime. I would love to do an episode about it. But like, it was a spiritual successor. It was, what if demonic invasion modern times?
Yeah. And see, that's the thing about like a lot of games, like you mentioned Torchwood previously.
Torchlight.
Torchlight. Sorry, Torchwood's a TV show. But I was thinking about Torchlight in part because the first Torchlight feels so at home.
It is basically Diablo 2, a different art style.
Yeah. But I think like one of the most fascinating ones for me is Worldstone.
Yeah.
Because Worldstone feels like a Diablo game that just tripped and fell into another Diablo game. I don't know how else to explain it. Like Path of Exile, both Path of Exile and Worldstone kind of approach it from wildly different angles, but they both kind of are doing the same thing when they're like, look, what we love is this, and we want to give you something that isn't just ripping that off, but that gives you the chance to feel about it the way we felt about this. And Path of Exile is really interesting in its mechanics. Like, I think you were talking about how it doesn't do the number inflation, but it's interesting in how it uses its mechanics to tell its story, which Worldstone also does, which the Diablo series has always done. In a lot of ways, the world of Sanctuary is revealed to us through stuff our characters can do. Druids really come to mind for me. One of the reasons Druids should be like a class everybody plays in Diablo, in my opinion, is because you start really thinking, what is going on in this world, that these spirit things can exist, that these giant bear monsters can come to me and give me their power. What are they? Where are they from? And I think the spirit world is going to come back more often now that we've seen it with the Spiritborn, because I think it explains a lot of things that up till now we haven't really had an explanation for. Like, where do monks get all these things? Where do druids get all these things? It's like they get them from here. It's kind of like the Implicate Order or the Other World from Celtic mythology for Diablo.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we could sit here and talk about this for hours on end, and who knows, we might do another episode, but thank you very much for that question. We're going to call it there because Blizzard Watch is made possible due to the generous contributions at patreon.com/BlizzardWatch. Your continued support means that this podcast site and community is able to thrive and grow. Blizzard Watch supporters enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to the podcast, better chance at having your question answered on our podcast with a Q&A and ads-free site experience. Again, thank you for sending in those questions. We have so many more to go through, and I want to keep that list growing. You go ahead and send those questions into podcast@blizzardwatch.com. Specify the show that it is for, as well as any special pronunciation of your name. Go ahead and also hit us up on Discord. We have the Q and Podcast Questions channel, which is open for everybody. Same rules apply. And then if you also are a Patreon subscriber, we have the Patreon Q and Podcast Questions channel, where we tend to look there first as a way of saying thank you for helping us keep the lights on. Yeah, I do want to thank you guys. This is the last Lore Watch of 2024. We've been doing this for a while now. We couldn't do it without your continued support.
Absolutely.
I'm looking forward to our next year. I'm looking forward to all the new content that we are going to have to talk about, and all the wild stuff that we can do going into 2025. And hopefully you are too. But thank you. We really appreciate it. With that, folks, we'll see you next year.